He was called the future Larry Bird, and all of America was certain that a new NBA superstar was being born. But just a few years later, the third overall pick turned into a symbol of unfulfilled hopes. Why couldn't even 2 championship rings save his reputation? What trial began long before his NBA debut? And what actually destroyed Adam Morrison's career? At the end of this video, you will learn why years later, many experts completely changed their minds about his destiny. When Adam Morrison stepped onto the court in the mid-2000s, it felt like the basketball world was witnessing the birth of a new legend.
If you enjoy, just like I do, discovering the real stories behind NBA legends, their incredible highs, tragic downfalls, and the little-known facts that are rarely talked about today, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps the channel grow and makes new videos possible. Thank you. Now, let's continue.
Tall, long-haired, with an unusual appearance and an incredible feel for the game, he completely mesmerized fans. Many experts were sure they were looking at a future NBA superstar. His shot, confidence, ability to score from the most difficult positions, and coolness in clutch moments invited the loudest comparisons. Some called him the new Larry Bird.
Others saw him as a player capable of becoming the face of an entire generation. It seemed he possessed everything necessary for a great career: talent, charisma, huge popularity, and a rare ability to take over the game when most preferred to hide in the shadows. With each game, his name echoed louder. Fans bought tickets out to see him live, television ratings climbed, and journalists wrote over and over that Morrison would be one of the main stars of the next decade. Millions of people were certain that the NBA would soon get a new idol. But sports have proven time and again that the most beautiful stories do not always end in triumph. Very little time passed before the talk surrounding Adam Morrison changed beyond recognition. His name was still frequently heard, but now in a completely different context.
Instead of talk about records and championships, one question was asked more and more. How could a man predicted for greatness disappear from the peak of the basketball world so quickly? For many, his story became one of the most mysterious in modern NBA history. Some blamed injuries. Others said he simply couldn't handle the level of the world's strongest league. A third group was certain the problem ran much deeper and began long before he ever stepped onto an NBA parquet. The most amazing thing is that many still do not fully understand the real reason behind his dramatic path. Behind the loud headlines, failed seasons, and mockery lay the story of a man who fought a battle from childhood that most of his opponents never even suspected. And it was this struggle that largely defined his entire future destiny. To understand why one of the brightest talents of his generation never became the player the whole world expected to see, we must go back to the very beginning. For long before fame, fate prepared a trial for Adam Morrison that most athletes could hardly have endured. From childhood, Adam Morrison's life unfolded unlike that of most future basketball stars. While other boys could carefree spend their days outside, his family had to face a trial that changed their routine life forever. When Adam was just 13 years old, doctors diagnosed him with type 1 diabetes. For a teenager dreaming of big sports, such news sounded like a death sentence. The illness required constant blood sugar monitoring, a strict diet, and regular insulin injections. Any mistake could lead to severe consequences. Many specialists believed professional sports with such limitations would be an almost unattainable goal. Basketball means constant overloads, high intensity, emotional tension, and unpredictable physical stress. Even completely healthy athletes are far from always able to withstand such a rhythm for years. But Adam Morrison refused to accept other people's predictions as a final verdict. Very quickly, the daily battle with the disease became part of his normal life. Before workouts, after workouts, before games, and right after the final buzzer, he checked his blood sugar, monitored his condition, and learned to understand his own body. Over time, all these procedures turned into a familiar routine without which he could no longer imagine a single day. His father, who was also one of his first coaches, played a huge role in this. He didn't let his son feel sorry for himself and constantly drilled a simple thought: the disease shouldn't define who a person becomes in the future. If achieving a goal requires working twice as hard as everyone else, it means you have to work exactly like that. Gradually, Morrison began to stand out among his peers. Despite the limitations, he grew stronger, more confident, and more dangerous on the court.
You couldn't call him the fastest or most athletic player, but he possessed qualities that cannot be measured with a stopwatch or a vertical jump. He read the game brilliantly, knew how to find open space, shot exceptionally well from distance, and almost always made the right decisions under pressure. Every year, it became obvious that coaches were dealing with a truly rare talent. Even those who doubted at first gradually changed their minds. Morrison didn't just cope with the disease, he proved he could be the best despite it. Playing for Meade High School in Spokane, Washington, he quickly turned into the team's main star. His scoring grew, and along with it grew interest from universities. Scouts watched every match closely, realizing this guy was capable of achieving a great deal. By that point, the illness was no longer the main event of his life. Now people talked more and more about something else: incredible basketball intelligence, a confident shot, and the ability to take responsibility in the most tense moments of a game. Soon came the moment that was supposed to change his entire life. Morrison got the opportunity to play for Gonzaga University, a program that already knew how to develop talented players. It was there that he was to walk a path after which the whole America would talk about him. The move to Gonzaga became the chance for Adam Morrison that doesn't come to every talented player. Here, he had to prove that his bright performances in high school basketball were no fluke. The first months could not be called simple. He had to get used to higher speeds, tough competition, and opponents who were already considered among the best young players in the country. However, Morrison progressed so quickly that soon almost no doubts remained. With each new season, he grew more confident, and his impact on the team's game grew right before people's eyes. He could score after the most difficult drives, shoot accurately from long range, and keep his calm even in the most tense moments of a match. The 2005 to 2006 season was especially bright. That was when Adam Morrison turned from a promising student into a true national star. On average, he scored over 28 points per game, becoming the top scorer of NCAA Division I. His matches gathered full stands, and television broadcasts attracted millions of viewers across the country. Every game turned into a real show. Fans came not only to support Gonzaga, but to see what Morrison would come up with this time. He played with immense dedication, didn't hide his emotions after big shots, and looked like a man who literally lived every second on the court. It was this sincerity that made him one of the most recognizable players in college basketball. In those months, all of America followed his remote rivalry with another NCAA star, J.J. Redick from Duke. Fans and journalists endlessly argued over who deserved the title of the season's best player. This rivalry became one of the main topics of the year, and every new game only fueled the interest. At the end of the season, Morrison received the prestigious USBWA National Player of the Year Award and shared the Sporting News College Player of the Year Award with Redick. He was also a unanimous selection for the All-American First Team. His name was featured in almost all the sports news of the country. But true popularity came during the NCAA tournament. Gonzaga confidently reached the Sweet 16 stage, where they met UCLA. Most of the game, Morrison's team controlled the match and was very close to advancing to the next round. Only a few minutes remained until historic success. However, the finish turned out to be one of the most dramatic in tournament history.
UCLA managed an incredible surge and snatched victory with a score of 73-71. After the final buzzer, television cameras showed Adam Morrison, who couldn't hold back his tears, right on the court. These frames instantly swept across the country. Some saw this as a display of genuine love for the game. Others considered such a reaction a sign of weakness. But regardless of opinions, one thing was obvious. Morrison had become a figure of national scale. People talked about him even if they didn't usually follow college basketball. Despite the painful loss, his reputation practically didn't suffer. On the contrary, most experts were sure that everything important lay ahead of him. The question was no longer whether Adam Morrison would make it to the NBA, but under what pick he would be selected, and which team would get the player many called a future superstar of the league. In the spring of 2006, Adam Morrison's name needed no introduction.
Most specialists were sure he would be one of the first players chosen in the NBA draft. Analysts broke down his game frame by frame, compared his strengths with legends of the past, and clubs evaluated carefully who would get one of the brightest talents of his generation. At the draft, expectations were fully met. With the third pick, Adam Morrison was selected by the Charlotte Bobcats. Only Andrea Bargnani and LaMarcus Aldridge were chosen higher. For Charlotte, it was an important moment. The club expected to get not just a strong basketball player, but a player around whom they could build the team's future. Management made no secret of its expectations. Morrison was supposed to become the scoring leader, the fans' favorite, and the franchise's new star. His popularity after performances at Gonzaga was so high that many considered the choice absolute common sense. Adam himself understood what responsibility now lay on his shoulders. Ahead was the strongest league in the world, where every night he had to step out against the best basketball players on the planet. Here, it no longer mattered how many awards you won in university. Every minute on the court required proving your value anew. The first months of his professional career turned out completely different from what many fans imagined. Morrison continued to shoot a lot, but efficiency gradually became a subject of discussion. NBA defenders were faster, stronger, and more experienced than those he faced before. Every open shot had to be earned, literally. Despite this, the debut season cannot be called a complete failure. Adam regularly entered the starting lineup, averaged 11.8 points per game, and earned a spot on the NBA All-Rookie second team. For most young players, such a start would be considered quite decent, but there was one problem. People expected a completely different level from Morrison. Every game of his was compared not to ordinary rookies, but to the image of the future superstar created back during his Gonzaga days. Any poor game instantly became a reason for criticism. Any miss was discussed as if he were already obligated to play at the level of the league's top basketball players. Pressure grew with each week. Journalists increasingly wondered why one of college basketball's most prolific scorers couldn't dominate in the NBA yet. Some experts urged patience, reminding that adaptation to a professional league takes time. Others began to doubt whether his style of play even fit modern basketball, where speed and athleticism were becoming ever more important. Nevertheless, Morrison kept working. He understood a full offseason was ahead, during which he could gain physical strength, fix weaknesses, and make his second season a real breakthrough. It seemed this was when the path leading him to NBA stardom was about to begin.
But fate prepared a trial, after which his career would never be the same again. One unlucky move in practice would change all plans and turn the long-awaited second season into the start of the hardest chapter of his basketball history. In the summer of 2007, Adam Morrison was preparing to prove to everyone that his first season was just the beginning of a big path. He worked hard on his physical conditioning, striving to become stronger, faster, and more confident. Inside the team, optimism remained as well. Charlotte management still believed that the second year in the league would allow his potential to fully unfold. But sometimes a single second is enough to change an entire career. During preparations for the new season, Morrison suffered a severe injury to his left knee. An examination confirmed the worst fears. The anterior cruciate ligament was torn. For a basketball player, such a diagnosis meant long months of recovery and a complete lack of playing practice.
The news was a real blow.
Just recently, he was called one of the most promising young players in the NBA, and now he had to watch matches from the sidelines. Instead of practices with the team, surgeries, rehabilitation, endless sessions with physiotherapists, and daily work on learning to trust his own body began. For any athlete, such a test is a serious check. But in Morrison's case, the situation was even harder. He was just starting to get used to the NBA level, and right at that moment, he was forced to miss the entire 2007 to 2008 season. While other young players gained experience, he lost the most valuable thing: playing practice and confidence. In professional sports, time rarely waits. Over a year in the league, new talents appear, coaches change, game schemes and roles within the team shift. When Morrison finally neared his return, it turned out much around him had already become different. He continued working with immense persistence.
Each stage of recovery required patience. First, he had to walk normally again, then run, later perform jumps and sharp changes of direction. Only after that could he think about returning to the parquet. However, even a successful completion of rehabilitation didn't mean the former Adam Morrison would return with it. After such injuries, players often start acting more cautiously, subconsciously avoiding movements they previously performed automatically. This hits basketball players especially hard when their game builds on confidence, rhythm, and a constant feel for the ball. When Morrison appeared on the court again, many noticed changes. He no longer looked like that dominant scorer who conquered college America a few years prior. Some flashes of former talent were still visible, but consistency was lacking. The shot stopped being as reliable, and his decision-making speed no longer gave him the previous advantage. Criticism, which used to concern only expectations, became significantly harsher now. People talked more and more about how Morrison would never become the player picked third in the draft. Fans began to lose patience, and mass media increasingly placed him among the most disappointing young players of that generation. Yet Adam himself wasn't going to give up. He kept fighting for his place in the league, hoping an opportunity to change people's minds would still appear ahead. Fate indeed prepared a new chance for him. True, it turned out completely different from what either Morrison or the millions following his career imagined. In 2009, an unexpected twist occurred in Adam Morrison's career. After several difficult seasons, the Charlotte Bobcats decided to part ways with a player they recently considered one of the club's main projects. He was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers, a team fighting for championship titles at the moment, and already possessing one of the strongest rosters in the league. At first glance, this looked like a gift from destiny. Thousands of basketball players dreamed of playing alongside Kobe Bryant, training under Phil Jackson, and ending up in a squad contending for a championship every year. It seemed Morrison could restart his career right there. But reality turned out completely different. In the Lakers, he was no longer the player around whom the future was built. The team had enough stars, experienced veterans, and performers who had long earned the coaching staff's trust. Morrison got a completely different role, a bench player who rarely appeared on the court and mostly watched games from the sidelines. For a person who just a few years earlier was considered one of the brightest talents in American basketball, this was a tough trial. He kept training hard, waiting for his chance, but got practically no playing time. Throughout the season, his participation in matches was episodic, and changing the situation grew harder and harder. The paradox was that it was precisely during this period that Adam Morrison became an NBA champion. In the 2008 to 2009 season, the Lakers won the title, and a year later repeated this success. Formally, Morrison became a two-time champion of the world's strongest league. Many players dream of even one such achievement. However, these championship rings didn't change the attitude toward his career. Fans understood well that Morrison's contribution to those victories was minimal. He almost didn't enter the court in decisive matches and played no noticeable role in the team's championship runs. Therefore, instead of admiration, mockery was heard more and more often. Some even called him one of the most unusual two-time champions in NBA history. Over time, such talk began to eclipse all his former achievements. People remembered the incredible Gonzaga season, the fight for the NCAA Player of the Year title, or the huge talent that once amazed the whole country, less and less. For a new generation of fans, Adam Morrison gradually turned into a symbol of unfulfilled expectations. In 2010, the Lakers refused to extend his contract. After that, Morrison tried to continue his career, playing outside the NBA, but could no longer return to the world's strongest league. His path at the highest level effectively came to an end at an age when many basketball players are just reaching their peak form. That is why his story still causes so many disputes. How did it happen that a man compared to Larry Bird and picked third in the draft failed to realize the potential the entire basketball world saw in him? The answer turned out much more complex than a simple explanation of injury or poor adaptation.
To truly understand Adam Morrison's destiny, one needs to look at his entire career as a whole and separate common myths from the real reasons that gradually changed his path. Over many years, a huge number of myths formed around Adam Morrison's career. Some claimed a severe knee injury was to blame for everything. Others were sure his style of play simply didn't match modern NBA requirements. A third group said he couldn't handle the psychological pressure after incredible success in college basketball. In reality, the truth lay somewhere in the middle. The injury really became one of the key moments of his career. The anterior cruciate ligament tear happened precisely when the young player was supposed to take the main step forward. Instead of a second season, which usually becomes defining for many talented basketball players, Morrison found himself in the middle of long recovery. He lost not only time, but also the opportunity to develop his game alongside the team.
However, it would be unfair to explain everything exclusively by this event. Even before the injury, specialists noted he would need to seriously rebuild his game in the NBA. In college basketball, Morrison could regularly create space for a shot, play at a comfortable pace, and take on a huge number of attacks. In the professional league, everything turned out differently. Defenders were faster, physically more powerful, and left almost no open zones. Besides, in the mid-2000s, the NBA was changing gradually. The league became more and more athletic. High speed, versatility, and reliable defense were demanded from players at his position. These were precisely the qualities hardest for Morrison. His strengths didn't disappear anywhere, but using them against the world's best basketball players became significantly tougher. One shouldn't forget the pressure accompanying him practically from the first day of his professional career.
After an outstanding season at Gonzaga, the public expected a new superstar to appear. Any good game was taken for granted, and every bad match turned into a reason for loud headlines. Such expectations can affect even the most experienced athletes. And Morrison found himself at the center of this attention at the very start of his journey, when he still had to get used to life in the NBA. Yet throughout his career, another trial ran like a red thread, one people remembered only occasionally. Type 1 diabetes didn't disappear after school or university years. Every day, Adam continued to control his condition, monitor his blood sugar levels, and follow a strict regimen. Despite this, he managed to reach the NBA, spend several seasons in the world's strongest league, and win 2 championship titles with the Los Angeles Lakers. That is why many former coaches and teammates prefer to evaluate his career much more cautiously than some fans do.
They remember not only unfulfilled expectations, but also the huge path he had to travel despite the circumstances. Not every athlete with a similar diagnosis even gets the opportunity to end up at such a level. Over time, the attitude toward Adam Morrison slowly began to change. More and more people started looking at his story without loud labels and hasty conclusions. And when the emotions around his playing failures quieted down, it became much easier to see a person who never stopped fighting, even when the entire basketball world stopped believing in him. That is why, years later, the conversation about Adam Morrison's legacy sounds completely different. His name still sparks debate, but now another question is asked more often. Was he truly the biggest disappointment of his generation? Or did his story turn out much more complex than it seemed at the moment of his departure from the NBA? Today, Adam Morrison's name no longer causes the hype that accompanied him in the mid-2000s.
A new generation of fans knows him quite differently from people who watched his incredible college season. For some, he remains a two-time NBA champion. For others, a symbol of unfulfilled expectations. But if you look closely at his entire story, it becomes obvious it is much deeper than any loud labels. After finishing his playing career, Morrison didn't disappear from basketball. He continued doing what he loved, working as a coach and passing his experience to young players. Over the years spent in the game, he managed to see basketball from different sides, from the role of college sports' main star to a person who had to find his place anew after severe trials. Interestingly, over time, the attitude toward him softened noticeably. More and more specialists admit that the expectations placed on Morrison after his performances at Gonzaga were almost impossible for any young player.
He was compared to legends even before his first NBA match, as if the path to greatness was already predetermined. But professional sports rarely follow neat scripts. Of course, one cannot deny that his career in the NBA turned out entirely different from what fans dreamed of. A high draft pick, outstanding play in the NCAA, and the status of one of the country's most promising players made people expect much more from him. That is why the disappointment turned out so loud. Simultaneously, one must not forget something else. Adam Morrison managed to achieve what remains an unattainable dream for millions of people. He reached the world's strongest basketball league, spent several seasons in it, played alongside the greatest basketball players of his time, and became part of 2 championship teams. And since his teenage years, he lived daily with a disease requiring constant control and discipline.
Perhaps the main mistake lies in the fact that many evaluate him exclusively through the prism of unfulfilled expectations. If you compare Morrison to the image of a future superstar created around him by journalists and experts, it might indeed seem he didn't live up to hopes. But if you look at his path as the story of a man who overcame a huge number of obstacles and still managed to climb to the peak of world basketball, the picture becomes completely different. Adam Morrison's story reminds us how thin the line between triumph and disappointment can be. Sometimes a single injury, one unsuccessful period, or overly high expectations from others are enough for an entire career to go down a completely different script. But that doesn't cancel out what a person had to go through, nor does it make his achievements less significant. That is why, years later, Adam Morrison remains one of the most unusual figures of his generation.
His story is not about loud records and dozens of seasons at the peak. It is about how unpredictable big sports can be and how easily public opinion can turn a future hero into a symbol of unfulfilled hopes. If you are interested in real stories of NBA legends, their incredible rises, dramatic twists of fate, and little-known facts, be sure to watch other videos on our channel. Right now, several interesting stories will appear on the screen. Choose any and continue your journey through the brightest and most challenging destinies in world basketball.